Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Buckeye Blueprint, your weekly source for Ohio State football analysis. My name is Colin Hassel and I'm joined as always by Nick McWilliams and Jacob Myers of the Lantern. Entering Saturday's Ohio State-Michigan State game, I think we all believed that the game would feel closer than a second-ranked team versus a 3-7 team. But 17-16, which of you guys saw that coming?
To be honest, when I first made the prediction, I didn't really factor in the weather conditions.
No, nor did I.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have said 42 points for Ohio State.
Yeah, I was right there with you. The coaching staff really game planned around the weather and the conditions there. Ran the ball a lot, obviously. You saw, 46 plays JT Barrett was responsible for the outcome. I think people are just going to end up forgetting about this game, really. OSU still ran 67 total plays. That's a pretty good pace for what they normally have. 7 punts on the day, definitely higher than what they normally have, but I think that was just the nature of the weather.
People may forget about this game, but should we, or is there something that we can take away from this? Because every single game, it seems like we've learned something different about this team, but this, it has the weather factor, so maybe that's just something where we see Ohio State adapted to the weather, and this is a positive sign for the Buckeyes, but maybe we don't really learn about them going forward.
Well, I think this is a game that everyone's going to forget about in the months to come, just because the simple fact that, the weather dictated how you had to run your offense in this. Ohio State ran the ball with Mike Weber and JT Barrett a total of 38 times, and most of those runs are going to be up the middle. Barrett usually does draws, Weber usually is an in-between the tackles kind of runner. So I think what you saw is Ohio State had to shrink their offense, and they took away that deep ball. I think one of the longest passes of the day was that touchdown pass to Curtis Samuel, and even that was only like 24 yards or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I think this is something that you could just kind of put away. We saw that Ohio State doesn't necessarily like cold weather, but they walked away with the win, and I think that's the only thing that's going to matter for them in the end.
Speaking of Curtis Samuel, on that play, they had one-on-one coverage, and Curtis Samuel just gave him one shake, and he was off to the races. So I have to ask Nick, Curtis Samuel touches. You think that he should have touched the ball more? Or is this a situation where the weather was a factor? Michigan State knew that he's their best player, so they were gonna target him.
Well, no, you said it right there. You said the weather dictated how you were going to spread the ball around on this team. You had to pound it up through the middle. That's the way when it's cold weather and it's blustery and there's snow. You just want to hand it off to your power back, get about 3 yards at a time, and then just keep on moving from there. You can't really throw the ball deep down the field to a guy like Curtis Samuel. And plus, whenever you're trying to run around the edge on a sweep, he's going to be a little bit slower with the cold weather, so that you take away that speed element.
They definitely gave it to the power back. Mike Weber maybe had his best game of the year. We saw it right from the get-go. He had that run. I think it was maybe the first or second drive where I thought he was about to do that Marshawn Lynch run where he pushed off like 3 guys. He pushed off the fourth guy, and I'm like, oh no, is he going?
Mini beast mode.
Then he didn't, but it was close.
Well, some of his largest critics this season have talked about his inability to break those ankle tackles, and he had 2 on that play, and then if he would have busted that third, he was off to the races. But he had a 52-yard run, which I think was the longest play from scrimmage on Saturday. That set up the game-winning touchdown. You're talking about a redshirt freshman running back, first year starting. That was his first touchdown on the road all season, and to do it in an environment like that, with the weather, everything, a tie game, and the later stages of the third quarter, that's huge. I think that's a huge momentum block for Weber.
And especially with his history in Michigan, too.
Yeah.
But I think something else you saw there was like kind of the development that we've seen of Mike Weber through the year.
Absolutely.
Normally, it wasn't just like the breaking off the ankle tackles and everything. He showed a lot of speed on that 52-yard run. He was outrunning a safety in a corner down the field. And, for a guy who's known for bulldozing guys, that's pretty impressive to be able to do something like that. So it just shows how they've been talking about how he's been growing as a player, and that's why he's the starting running back right now.
Yeah, and I think another takeaway, I know you wanted to talk about LJ Scott. That's the defense. It was really similar to what I thought the Wisconsin game that, they gave up a lot of big plays. I think there were 4 alone from LJ Scott, especially the second play from scrimmage. But aside from that drive, when they got in the red zone, they stood tall. They stood up, and they, not including the 2-point conversion that was an interception, they had 3 on the day. So the defense is able to make stops when they absolutely have to, and that's kind of been the overwhelming progress of this team.
They mentioned, Ohio State players individually have mentioned, they have sometimes been a bend but not break defense, and they certainly were in this one. The issue is, every once in a while, before they can get to that stage where they bend, they've sometimes broken, and they've gotten these large plays. And LJ Scott, he is so good. I'm so impressed by him. should we be worried about the Buckeyes' issues about stopping a big player, or should we be saying, wow, L.J. Scott is an incredible running back?
Well, something I noticed on Saturday was Ohio State, their defense they call the Silver Bullets, and they really pride themselves on being able to be aggressive on the ball. They really being able to break up runs in the backfield. Now, be that as it may, they occasionally mess up with that. They bite on a play that ends up hurting them a lot. One of the plays that I could think of is they did Michigan State had a wide receiver come in motion from right to left on the field, and it drew the corner for Ohio State off. I think it was Denzel Ward. So what ended up happening is when O'Connor took the snap and faked the handoff to the wide receiver who was cutting across, the entire defensive line and the linebackers broke to that side, and L.J. Scott had a huge hole with no one within 10 yards of him. Luckily, they had a corner come over and make the tackle about 24 yards down the field. But you can't really give up those plays consistently if you want to win. It's bend but don't break. I understand that, but 24-yard gains constantly, that's going to build up quick.
I completely agree with that.
So I think it's a case where they kind of have to tone it back sometimes. It's okay to play conservative every now and then if you think you know what's coming.
And the one thing else that I will say about the defense is I'm always impressed by them against the pass. They don't really give up big passing touchdowns. They had the one L.J. Scott had a 70-yard passing touchdown,
Right.
but that was right in the flats. That was not the quarterbacks or safeties' fault of going downfield.
Yeah, you look at the history, especially with Michigan State. D'Antonio was a part of Ohio State, Jim Tressel's staffs. They know those complex blocking schemes that always seem to get Ohio State defenses. That was just one of those cases. I think that's an anomaly.
Mm-hmm. And all right, so here we'll head to the game. We'll head to the Michigan game. We've wanted to talk about this for the entire season. We've known the potential of what this game could be. This game could be Urban versus Harbaugh. This game could be the two best teams in the Big Ten, and maybe the two best teams in college football. And now they're number 2 and number 3, and we have exactly what we want. What else is there to say about this game? This is maybe the most exciting Ohio State-Michigan game we've seen in how long?
You go back to 2006, really, when it was 1 versus 2. That's the last time, especially in Ohio Stadium. Last year was the first top 10 matchup since that 1-2 game. And, this year, you could call it a play-in for the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. I know if Michigan wins, they'll have a game in the Big Ten championship, but there's just so many ramifications, not only for the Big Ten, but college football as a whole. And to come down to what is arguably the greatest rivalry in all of sport is why we do this, why we love sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exactly what you brought up with the 2006 game. How fitting is this that this is the 10-year anniversary of the game of the century? You're seeing a case here where this game means almost everything to both of these teams. Everything you've done throughout the season, yeah, that was important, but now this is it. Your season comes down to here. And one of the players, I believe it was, I got to think, I don't think it was Weber, but one of them said, this is what we've been training for. It's going to be like a national championship. This is what they're looking at this game as. So
that was Mike Weber.
Yeah, and you might be thinking there's still weeks to play after this, possibly, and there's still a bowl game and everything. Not for these guys. You have to focus. They say week by week, take it one game at a time. This is exactly what they meant. You have to look at Michigan as the biggest game of the year.
Yeah, and I think the one thing going forward from Michigan State to this game is Michigan State came into that game with under 1 sack per game, and they got to JT 3 times. Now,
that was without Malik McDowell, too.
Right.
So I was looking forward to that matchup last week, as I said, and we did not get it.
Yeah, exactly. And albeit that might be because they put 8 in the box all the time, knowing that Ohio State was going to run and dial up some blitzes. But the Michigan defense, they're first in total defense. They're first in scoring defense. This is a tough, physical Big Ten defense that Ohio State really has not faced yet this year.
I think one of the worst things to see from the Michigan State defense, that Ohio State saw was free blitzers who didn't even get touched by blockers coming in. When Barrett was sacked, he got hit by guys who were just running full speed at him sometimes. And that's something that doesn't really happen with Ohio State's offensive line very often.
So knowing that this Michigan defense is going to be the best defense that they've faced this year, and maybe the best defense they'll face all year, who are they going to rely on? Are they going to have this game where they have JT Barrett rush 26 times and Curtis Samuel touch the ball 9 times? Or are they going to have to go, they're maybe going to have to throw it through the air a little bit more than they would like? What are they going to have to do?
I don't think they're going to change up their game plan one bit.
I agree with that.
I think they did try to get the ball downfield this week. They knew they were going to run a little more, but sometimes that just was taken away. What is going to be the big thing are those hog mollies up front, the slobs. All right. They're going to go off the right tackle, Isaiah Prince. He kind of had a rough game last week. I saw several times Billy Price and JT Barrett would talk to him. Jabril Peppers goes everywhere. You really have to account for him on every single play. Watch for him to go on that right side of that line, and I think the game's going to be dictated by those guys up front.
I don't see Michigan necessarily keying in on one side, because the problem that you run into when you do that, and you're as a defense, we're going to attack this one guy over and over and over again. You kind of forget that you have Billy Price over on that side too, who is a very quality blocking guard. So I think what will happen is if Michigan just decides to key on that right side, they're cutting off the rest of their defense. If you don't have the ability to switch over to the other side, and you just planned all week to go to the right, you're going to run into problems if it's not working. So I think you expect to see Michigan coming from all angles and throwing some stuff at Ohio State we haven't even seen all year.
So knowing that the offensive line success is the precursor to Ohio State's success, say they do succeed in their job, what is the optimal touches for everyone? Is Curtis Samuel the guy who gets 20 touches this game? Are they going to go downfield at all? Are they going to do exactly what they have done and spread it all around, get JT Barrett have 15 to 20 rushes, have Mike Weber have 15 to 20?
Yeah, I think one thing that they may try to do that I didn't feel like they did against Michigan State is put the game on the perimeter. I think they could have those jet sweeps. They started to use it more as a decoy this week, which I think has worked really, really well, especially against Maryland. It worked well.
Curtis doesn't work well against Maryland now.
Yeah, we have that argument for another day. But against Michigan, Curtis Samuel, I think they're going to try to wear out this Michigan defense. They know they're just as skilled as OSU's offense and just as skilled as OSU's defense too. So, these teams go against the same players in practice every day. That's just how talented these two teams are. If they put the game on the perimeter, could open up some things inside. Bottom line, these two teams are very well coached. So to find one weakness, it's going to be very interesting. I really can't put one thing.
Well, you said wear down the Michigan defense is going to be the goal from that. That's why I think Mike Weber's going to get a healthy touch of carries here. I think they're going to try to wear him down by running up through the middle. Peppers is a safety who can play linebacker too, who's going to play in the middle. He's going to get his tackles. He's going to make plays. That's just going to happen. But I think by putting Weber with a lot of carries up through the middle, you're going to have to make him cheat in some more. And with him not down the field as a safety, I think you have a better chance of throwing the ball downfield to Curtis Samuel or possibly maybe KJ Hill or somebody else who's pretty quick who I haven't really seen a lot recently. But I think it's going to be a lot of Weber up the middle and a lot of short out route kind of passes and slants, which I know Ohio State fans do not like to see. They like to see them uncork the long ball. But I think with Michigan, you got to take what you can get. They're not a team that you want to try to attack and force the ball on.
Before we go ahead and make our predictions, let's talk about the other side of the ball real quickly. So Wilton Speight, is he going to play? We don't really know. Who's going to be their threat if Wilton Speight doesn't play?
Well, we know that Harbaugh is going to put him out there and try to look like he can throw a football like he did last week. It's hard not to pick Davion Smith out of the 150-plus yards he had last week coming off a tough game the week before against Iowa. I think the OSU defense, especially the linebackers, are going to be up to that task of containing the run. And then you got Amari Darboh, Jake Butt. A very strong receiving core, too, on the outside. So it's going to be a challenge across the board for Ohio State. But Davion Smith, given the weather conditions, I think they're really going to rely on him.
L.J. Scott carried the ball for 19 times for 160 yards, and in a lot of ways he really gashed the Ohio State defense on just a few plays. Normally, a lot of these inside runs they stopped. Davion Smith is the kind of guy who we saw against Indiana. He carried that team to victory essentially because John O'Korn was coming in. It was his first action of the year, really, in terms of starting and everything. So Davion Smith is the kind of running back who you really have to be careful with, who can really make you pay. Now he's a big, physical, inside the tackles kind of runner. And that's something that Ohio State has struggled with at times, it seems like. And not only that, you mentioned Jake Butt. Ohio State, when they went up against a really good tight end last time, I believe it was against Wisconsin with Fumagale, and he had a really impressive game. So, I think they're going to have to key in on those two guys. I think with John O'Korn, the problem is that you're going to run into is that you have such a small sample size to watch what he's done this year. He didn't really play that well against Indiana. So it's going to be an interesting test for the Ohio State defense, and we've been talking bend but don't break. That's not going to work here against Michigan. You have to make plays, and you have to stop them quickly.
I think they're going to try to make Michigan make those plays through the air. They're going to load the box like they did against Michigan State. They're going to try to get to O'Korn like they did O'Connor.
Make them beat you deep. Basically.
Exactly.
All right, we're at the time of the show where we're going to do predictions, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with Nick because Nick apparently has been our Nostradamus. He is leading us in predictions. So, Ohio State or Michigan?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm definitely going to say Michigan on this. I really just think, from what I've seen from Ohio State, they've had 2 weeks where they looked incredible against Nebraska and Maryland and then fell off a little bit here against Michigan State. I think the offense is still, at times, looking for what to do. They're kind of looking for the guy who's a playmaker in terms of maybe wide receiver or anything. And the problem is you kind of need pretty good wide receivers to beat Michigan's team. They have a very good secondary and a very good pass rush. And if you have wide receivers not getting open, JT Barrett's going to be on the ground a lot this game. So I see Michigan taking this 21-17.
I'm going to go with OSU. I think at home, I just can't see Meyer losing to Harbaugh in Ohio Stadium. I think it just comes down to that. I get that the players are the ones that have to make the plays, but JT Barrett, I think he's going to hold it to himself, trying to complete a game that he couldn't in 2014 due to his broken ankle he suffered during the game. I think he's going to have one of his best games of the season on Saturday, and I got OSU 23-17.
I'm going to pick OSU too. I've got OSU 24-23. I think this game's going to be incredible. I think these two teams are so evenly matched. If JT Barrett does have the best game of his career, I think he needs to. I think that if he doesn't, they're going to have major issues because he is their offense. I'll say that. Like as JT Barrett goes, the offense goes, and he's going to need to have a huge game. I think Curtis Samuel's going to have a big game. I think Mike Weber's going to have a big game, and they all need to have big games because Ohio State's offense needs everyone. They don't have people who they can spare, and the defense. They've gotten turnovers all year. I think they're going to have to get at least one more big one, maybe return for a touchdown, because they seem to return every turnover for a touchdown this year. So I think I think they need to get 1 to 2 turnovers to keep this an Ohio State game.
If there's one thing, I think the play of the game is going to be dictated by both defensive line units. They're very, very strong units, some of the best in the country. So either going to run the ball, get O'Korn or Barrett to get that ball out of their hands quickly. Look for that to be a key part of the game.
And not only that, we saw last week or on Saturday, that both of these teams don't necessarily do great in terrible weather. Both teams had to play through some very poor conditions. So it might be another kind of knockdown, drag 'em out game that, an Ohio State-Michigan game always is.
I'm so excited for this. This is going to be amazing. This is the first one that we've all covered. We've all seen so many of them.
I was at the 1-2 game, just putting that out there.
And you're also at the 2-3 game. And we'll see if it's a similar outcome. All right, that's been this show. I'm so excited to see what we'll talk about a week from now. Thanks to Nick and Jacob. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and whatever else.
All that good stuff.
All the good stuff. We'll see you next week.